testing. It's showing that it's working.
Is the microphone input device set correctly?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's testing that it's working. It's showing that it's working, but again, we have a delay. Anything? Any sound? Can you hear the sound? It should have worked by now. Oh, there, I hear it. Okay, I just heard me. Okay, sorry about that. I don't know what happened, but the wonder of behind the scenes, it's kind of weird because I have this setup. I'll show you. Like, I have this mic over here, and I have to tell the stream that pulls into YouTube which mic to pull. So sorry about that. It's working. I have a bar at the bottom.
Either it's the fit to stretch thing or it's
oh yeah.
Crop button.
Okay,
I think it's the stretch thing.
I already fixed it once. Okay, my husband says that I gotta fix the thing. There we go. Okay. Whoops. Let me see the my face. Okay. There we go. Hopefully everything's working now. Sorry about that. I thought I had it all set up perfectly and I did not. Okay, so let's jump in. Sorry for the delay. Technology. What are you gonna do? Yeah. Okay. So we are now done with this and wanting to know, are you any of you interested in reading the sequels now that you've read this? Is the sound still better? Is the sound still bad? Sounds good. Okay.
Everything's great.
Sounds good. Yay! Sorry about that. Simon, if you want them to have your email, let me know. I have your email and I will send it to them. Okay, so you finished this and there are multiple sequels to this novel. So I'm kind of curious, any of you interested in reading any of the sequels, or are you kind of good with letting the story resolve the way that it did at the end? So I'm interested in what you're saying, what you want to say here. Sometimes I don't like sequels. Like one of my favorite books is The Giver, but the sequel Gathering Blue, I didn't care for. So, but then there are other series where I love the sequels like Lord of the Rings and even A Wrinkle in Time. Some of the sequels I liked. So I'm just kind of curious. All right. So scale of 1 to 5, scale of 1 to 5. How did you like it? This last ending, this last section, did you like it? So curious to see those numbers come in and curious to see the decimals that I always get, which is awesome. Okay, the sequels, there are several of them. One is called Frightful's Mountain. One is called The Other Side of the Mountain. There are a few. Oh yeah, Harry Potter is another one for good sequels. So, all right, let's look at last week. So we had very different views on whether people preferred the second section that we read, like that middle section, or the first section. So Deb Coatney said, I like this section better because he was more knowledgeable. That was the second section. But Laura says, I like the first section better because I think it's a little more, a little repetitive once you get further in. So there you go. Okay. And then there was this. It was like all of this thing where people have the unmitigated gall to schedule something else at the same time as our class. I mean, come on, people, right? And cookie, because it's Mrs. Van, peoples. Yes, we need to have class. And then an apology to Deb Coney. Why did I ignore this? Now, I have to tell you that I actually went and searched the internet for what does YCOS mean. I was like, does it mean why cuz? Like, why did you do that? I'm not sure, but I'm so sorry. I left that one out. And so here it is, the book pairing, Call of the Wild and My Side of the Mountain. Now, one thing I liked about this pairing was that the Call of the Wild was written by Jack London, who, as I mentioned when we did To Build a Fire, is a very distant cousin of mine, but also because it was an author that we read one of the short stories. So I like this, but I also feel like it gives a very different feel.
The White Cause, did you?
Yeah, what is that?
That's me. I did that.
You did that?
That's that you commented on stream.
Oh,
remember?
That's, you know what,
that's
the
us.
YCOS, that's actually my husband's shorthand. He just reminded me because he gives me the chat and he'll tell me if I commented, and that's his own abbreviation of "you commented on stream." And so I thought it was Deb Coney who put that in, but it was really Mr. Vanstar. Sorry, he told me he was going to use that, and I messed it up. Anyway, I think this is a great pairing because they're both very similar in the idea that they're wilderness stories, but they're very different in their tone, in the mood, and in the plot. Like, they're really interesting. So nice. So there we go. Okay, so then this was the reaction to the choice of the next book. So some people were very excited, as you can see, to the 10,000th power, and then others were not so excited. So I had to say, this has been an interesting thing for me because I hadn't read this book before. And so I've been reading it for the first time, and I'm really enjoying it. And in the interest of full disclosure, this is not my genre. So I think that there's a lot in here, as you can maybe tell by post-it flag goodness, and I think you'll like it. Pro tip: if you don't have this book yet and you want the actual book as opposed to the ebook, if you want the physical copy, my recommendation for you would be to order it through Barnes & Noble rather than Amazon. And the reason is that Amazon is deprioritizing books right now, and Barnes & Noble is all they do, and they're not. So I ordered some books yesterday from Barnes & Noble, and they're going to be here on Tuesday. So you may want to try Barnes & Noble if you want the physical copy and you want to get it faster. Now remember, for next week, you don't actually have to have done any of the reading. Next week, I'm just going to be introducing the novel, and we're going to meet Napoleon and learn some about the Napoleonic Wars, because that's the background of this whole novel. And you really do get a lot more out of this novel if you know a little bit about that. So there we go. Yes, it's called His Majesty's Dragon. His Majesty's Dragon. And you'll see more, again, the link at the end of the class today. Not at the end of the class, right here. Here's the link. So this link, bit.ly / Mrs. Van-Dragon, that's the flyer that will tell you exactly what chapters we're reading. Now, this book is divided up into chapters with numbers, which makes it a little bit easier. And it will tell you what we're studying each week. I think the flyer itself looks cool. I was pretty proud of myself. So there you go. Actually, Jay Sand, the price on Barnes & Noble was the exact same as Amazon for this book. I know sometimes they might be higher, but in this case, it was the same. Okay, so Shred Dragon said, by the way, on my house's porch, there's a mop leaning on the wall, and some time ago we discovered a nest on top of the mop, and a week ago the birds hatched. So cute, they just grew hairs. And I just love that. I love the idea that birds just find these random places to build nests. Those of you who were with me during the short story class know that I had a little bird, a finch, that had built its nest in an ivy plant outside my window, and I'm looking to the right like you can see it, but it's right outside this window right here. And those little birds hatched, and at first we could just see these mouths, and then one day they learned to fly, and it was just absolutely incredible. I actually posted a video of them learning to fly on Twitter. So if you watch on Twitter, I'll put in my Twitter hashtag here, at Gifted Guru. If you go look back through some older tweets, you'll see a video of that. Okay, so then we had the real one is the best forever and always, talking about the difference between like real books, and we also talked about like movies versus the book. Yeah, it was a cool discussion last week. And you know, if you ever miss a class, you can always go back because they're up there. And then we were talking about books in the house, like real books. This is the same conversation, real books versus ebooks, and then all of these books. And I think that it's so fun to live with books. I think there are books in every room of our house. And I loved this idea, this comment that Elizabeth made about maybe when it was written, kids had more freedom. Now a kid can't play outside in their own yard by themselves without someone thinking social services needs to be called. And that is so true. There has actually been a research study done. And this is just a image from the study that they did. And the study was done in England. And they showed, like, over generations of the same family, how far the kids were allowed to roam. And so that huge area was where like the great grandparent was allowed to go. And then you see it get down with the grandparent and then even more with the parent. And then the child wasn't even allowed to go outside of their yard without, like parental supervision, basically. So you were spot on there. Spot on. And then we talked about where names came from and the importance of names. We actually have one more thing named in this section today. But Noelle said, my mom wanted to call me Scarlet from Gone with the Wind, but my dad said no. Now, I'm with your dad, Noelle, because Scarlet in Gone with the Wind is not the most sympathetic of characters. She's kind of a mean girl. So I don't know. And then I love this. So I'm Ava, and that means songbird, which is perfect for our book today. I think it's lovely to know what your name is from and what it means. So Kaval says he didn't realize he was missing human company until he lost it, but in the same token, he didn't realize he was missing animal company until he had it back. And the thing I loved about that comment was just the idea that when you give up one thing, you almost always give up something in order to get something else, right? And that there's always some kind of sacrifice. There's even that song, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. And I think that is true in so many things in our lives. And I just love that. Now I'm seeing some of your comments. I just want to mention. So having books on your shelf, even after you've read them. Yes. Kieran1234, if I'm saying your name right. I think you're so right, like living with books. And I think that's something I really learned from my mother. And I still feel that way. And then I love that. I agree with you, Deb Coatney, about how some of the things that we have in modern life are just not so great. But I loved this comment. All right, so ready to dive in. And sorry again for those technical difficulties in the beginning. So key events. I think in the novel, so feel free to add any in the comments that you think you would like to have added. I think he gets deer from the hunters, like more deer. Dad and Bando comes for Christmas. Are you serious? At first I just said Bando comes for Christmas, and then I added dad, and I forgot to change the verb. So there you go. Hashtag English teacher fail. And then, but I wrote a book on perfectionism and how to overcome it. And so I can't go crazy about typos. Okay, so, a new hashtag, roam free, freedom for kids. Love it, love it. Okay, and we go through winter, and then we go through spring, and then we get the ending. Interested in seeing any of your ideas about what else we need to do. All right, so question for you. Did Sam want to be found? I asked you at the end of the last class to read these chapters through that lens. So do you think that Sam wanted to be found? And do you think that some dreams have an inevitable ending? Meaning that like, no matter how great it was, that at some point it has to come to an end. It's just built into it. Yeah, English teacher fail. There's a new hashtag for you. I love that one. Okay. And then we have our unanswered question. Can you ever really run away? Can you ever really run away? And our perspective that we're looking at the book through is, what does it mean to me to be self-reliant? Okay, so first chapter that we read for this week was in which I find out what to do with hunters. And he said, I thought I would stay in the tree until the hunter quartered his kill and dragged it onto the road. And I thought this was interesting. And then I wondered what that said about perspective. Like, we're looking at the book through the perspective of self-reliance and what it means to me. And I think that we could read this book again and we could get a whole different feeling from the book. Like the whole tone would change, the whole tenor would change if we looked at it through a different perspective. If we weren't looking at it through the idea of whether or not you can really run away. Like, we could read it through the book. We could read it through the lens of like the relationship between humans and animals. We could read it through the lens of nature. We could, and like an appreciation of nature. We could read it as like a green thing. We could read like from an environmentalist standpoint or a naturalist standpoint. We could read it through the lens of what it says about friendship and the friendship between people who are very, very different and what it really means to be a friend. Like there's so many different perspectives. And I think that this tells us that perspective is everything. Can you tell what this is in this picture? The perspective is very different than the perspective that we're used to looking at this picture from. And so, afraid of heights, hurting my eyes, right? Long way down. Yes, it is the Eiffel Tower, Simon. It is the Eiffel Tower. It looked very different than how we're usually used to looking at it. So Sam says this, hunters are excellent friends if used correctly. Whoa. I thought to myself when I saw this, like, really? Because can you use friends correctly? Like, is there such a thing? Are friends there to be used? And if you are using someone, are they really your friend? And what does that mean? Like, my best friend is a therapist. And so sometimes when I talk to her just about general stuff, I feel worried. Like, am I just using her because she's a therapist and she has all those skills, right? But then every now and then she has tech questions that she asks me, right? So can you use friends correctly? Kind of interesting. Yeah, what does being a friend really mean? And can you use a friend? Sam says, if you are extremely careful, you can sometimes get to it before they do and hide it. And I was like, whoa, because I think there's a big difference between waiting and like until they go away and realize that they can't find it and then you take it versus taking it before they have a chance to find it. Like that just struck me, and I wondered if it struck you. Like, what did you think about it? Did you think it was different to take it before they even had a chance to versus to take it because they couldn't find it? So I'm kind of curious what you think, right? Yeah. All right, so we're at Sam's skills. Remember, we have 2 pages of them. Here we are. He uses, we left off last section of the book with it. He made the clay chimney, and now we're at that he uses the deer for more stuff. Like he's making more stuff with the deer. That's another one of his skills. Okay, so next chapter. And I set up the skills a little bit differently this time. I didn't put them in as we found them. I put them in at the end of every chapter. Like before I go to the next chapter, I'm listing the skills that he gained in that chapter. So the next chapter in which trouble begins. So he made this clothing out of deer, and I think that we're pretty sure it does not look on trend, but he's very proud of it. And I couldn't find a picture that had shared use rights. I try to follow copyright law in the class, and so I look for images that have the right to be shared, and I couldn't find one that really had like that deer skin look I was looking for. But this is actually a picture of authentic clothing from Plains Indians. And I was wondering, I was thinking about how different what Sam made was from this, and I was curious about whether you thought he was excited because he thought it looked good or whether he was excited because he made it. And how sometimes we get, I know his skills seem endless, Molly, you're so right. Oh, you're so right. So I think that sometimes we're excited about something just because we made it, even if it's not very good. There's a picture of me when I'm like 10 years old, and I'm holding up a cake that I made, and I made it in a bundt pan, and it's completely collapsed. But I'm so proud of it because it's like the first cake I made. So I don't know. I think he realizes it doesn't look good, but he's proud all the same. And I think there's such a lesson for us there that's okay. And then he says, then I did something which took me by surprise. Before I could talk myself out of it, I was on my way to town. And I feel like, oh, can you really ever run away, right? Or is that pull to humanity strong? And so my question for you is, can you really surprise yourself? Because that's what he says, right? Then I did something which took me by surprise. Can you really surprise yourself, or are you just pretending to yourself? I love it when I can ask a question, because then it lets me go look at the chat to see some of your answers from the last skills, right? Yeah, I think Deb Coney, I don't have half the skills he has, and I think I'm older than he is. But I think we have different skills, right? You have different skills than he had. You don't need the skills he had. Like, what? How much call do you have to make clothes out of deerskin, right? So it is not necessarily that you have fewer skills; it's that you have different skills. Like he wouldn't know how to do a a PowerPoint, and he wouldn't know how to participate in a YouTube live chat. Yes, Jay Sand, I was the same way. I was like, stop, don't go to town. This is going to be the beginning of the end. Run for your life, right? And he says, it was Sunday, but I knew the library was closed. And I was like, wait a minute. You are literally counting days on a stick, and you know what day of the week it is? I mean, we're having this discussion in the middle of the coronavirus quarantine, and I lose track of the days, and I have a calendar. So I'm thinking to myself, really? You knew it was Sunday? Like, I don't know. I that one was a little bit like, to me, I was like, I don't know. And then he meets that kid in the drugstore, and the kid says, my kid brother has one that looks more real than that thing. And I thought, isn't it so freaky when something that is fake looks more real than the thing that's real? And this happened. So I went and found pictures. These are fake plants, and they look just as real or even more real than the real thing, right? Like, and that is so weird. Anyway, I think that's funny. Well, I don't know, Andrew. He doesn't really visit town that frequently, right? He went to the library, and then he went to that lady's house, but I don't know that either of those things would make him know the days. I don't know. I mean, I just think it's kind of odd that he would know it's Sunday, but I like it that you are more generous to him than I am. And when these kids are talking, Sam says, I'm hardly a member of a gang. Are you? And the kid says, out here? Nah. We bowl. And I was like, really? Is bowling the opposite of being in a gang? Like, if you're not in a gang, ergo you must be a bowler. I just thought that was like a weird thing. Ooh, Strudel Kitty, Snapple apple juice tastes more like apples than apples do. Yes, you know what else that's true of? Now, a lot of you won't be able to relate to this, but like sometimes I'll get like a grape lip gloss, like a lip smacker, and the grape one tastes more grape than grapes. Or like strawberry flavor sometimes tastes more like strawberry than strawberries do. Like, anyway, so funny. Yeah, we out here we bowl, right? Well, I like bowling, but I just think it's weird. Like, that's the opposite of being in a gang. And then he goes back and he says, Frightful. He goes back and he tells Frightful. Frightful had a Post-it note. He tells Frightful, I made a friend today. And Frightful says, I think that's what you had in mind all the time, Sam. No. So I know Frightful's an owl. I know Frightful is a falcon, but I only have an owl puppet. Okay. So do you think that's what I had in mind all the time? And I think that's the idea of like, can you ever really run away? It's exactly what we're looking at. And then he says, I had liked him, although we hadn't even had a fight. All the best friends I had, I'd always fought, then got to like them after the wounds healed. I was like, is this a healthy dynamic? And I just wonder, I haven't really felt that before, that like I meet somebody and I need to have a fight with them before we can be friends. I do know that if I've been friends with someone for a while, that sometimes if we have a disagreement and then we move past it, I do feel like it deepens the friendship in some ways, but I thought this was odd. I am loving the new hashtag out here we bowl. I think that's awesome. Yeah, it's Frightful is a genius. We're going to see something creepy about that later. And then Sam has this realization. I have forgotten to do a terribly important thing, stack up a big wood pile. Sometimes I wonder if I will make it to spring. Again, can you ever really run away? Because can you run away from your fears? Can you run away from life and what it takes to live your life? I think that's interesting. And I think that this is a realistic thing. Okay, so how Sam learns his skills, and he learned his skill from the animal's behavior. That's what made him realize, I forgot to stack wood, right? He could tell that the animals were preparing for winter, and it made him realize it. Molly, I think you're right. We also are drawn to civilization. Yeah. All right. So Sam skills, more skills in this chapter. He chops a lot of wood. And you know what? That is a skill, and it is very, very, very hard work. There was a series on PBS. It was like one of those short, like, it was one of those things. It was an early version of like, the ones where like people go live in a house as a reality TV show, but they had these people go out, and I think it was in Montana, and it was like Pioneer House or something like that, I think it was called. And there were these 4 families that went out and they had to live, and then at the end of the season they got evaluated for their preparation for the winter, and the thing that they all got gigged on was not having enough wood. And it turns out that chopping wood is like absolutely hugely hard to do. Okay, so the next chapter, in which I pile up wood and go on with winter. And he says, the narrator tells us, Sam, the narrator, tells us, now I am almost to that snowstorm. And so it's like, okay, we're coming full circle. And so I know, oh, the story is coming to a close, right? And Jason, you watched that series that I was talking about, the Pioneer one. I really liked it. I've tried to go find it again. I really liked it. Anyway, he says, I was glad to hear the nuthatches and chickadees. They gave me the feeling that I still had time to chop. And I think I loved this line because I feel like we all have nuthatches and chickadees in our lives. The people around us who make us feel like we still have time to chop. Like the people who make us feel that we can do it, who encourage us rather than say you're too late or you're too young or you're too old or you're too whatever, that you aren't enough. And I think I just love this idea of that having nuthatches and chickadees in our lives, and you don't have time in your life for people who don't make you feel like that. So make sure, like, if you have someone in your life who is kind of giving you the feeling that you can't fulfill your dreams or that you're not enough to do something that you want to do, I think it will be a good thing to remember this scene and remember that even though it was late and even though it would be hard, that the thing that inspired him were the nuthatches and chickadees who gave him the feeling that he still had time to chop. So look for those. Frontier House on PBS. Okay, Frontier House, not Pioneer House, Frontier House. Thank you, Nancy, for that. Thank you for that. Frontier House. I loved that show. I tried to watch another one they did that was like like more set in Jane Austen, and it was in England. I didn't like it as well, but Frontier House was actually good. I made many wood piles leading out into the forest, and I thought this was interesting because it made me realize he's no longer worried about being found. He's making wood piles, and I didn't know whether to read this as, well, it's winter and people aren't going to be tramping around or traipsing around tramping or traipsing around the forest. And so is he just not worried about it anymore, or does he want to be found? And I'm kind of curious what you think. Like, cooking, never too many hashtags, right? What do you think? Do you think he wasn't worried about the wood piles because he didn't think people would come, or that he kind of wanted to be found? So kind of curious. I kept cutting wood and piling like a nervous child biting his nails. And this is this more figurative language, right? And we can imagine like a little kid, almost manic behavior. And I think sometimes fear drives us. Like we're all worried about being afraid. Like we worry about being afraid. Like we feel afraid and we worry that that's bad. But I think sometimes fear, a little fear is good. Like if you have no fear, you'll run out into the street and get hit by a car, right? But you need a little bit of fear to kind of drive you. And if you don't have any fear, if you're not worried about things you should be worried about, you can get into some real trouble. And he says, it was almost with relief that I saw the storm arrive. And I have to tell you that it is because of Cloudfall 2260 that I always have to have at least one GIF or GIF because she likes them. So here we go. It was almost with relief that I saw the storm arrive. Now, this is from the Two Towers in Lord of the Rings, and it is the Battle of Helm's Deep, and they've like all prepared and they're waiting for the enemy to arrive. And it's almost a relief when it finally happens. Like the apprehension is sometimes worse than the actual thing. Now, I called it the Battle of Helm's Deep, but those of us who are Lord of the Rings purists know it's technically the Battle of the Hornburg. I do know that. But I think that there is this sense. I don't know if any of you have ever had that. I've had that feeling when I've been about to like I've had surgery recently and I had to go have a second surgery, and it's just like almost a relief when you get it over. That nonchalant way you just say. Oh, Jason, you crack me up. Okay, so I love this. Out of the sky from a pinpoint of a thing would drive my beautiful another English teacher fail. I need a hashtag English teacher fail for spelling falcon with the letters reversed there. But I loved the structure of this. So let's look at it more closely. Let's see here. Grammar goodness moment. I saw that structure and we just had to do it. I just had to share it. Like I just love these things when I see them in the story. Okay, so first, we're going to do this as kind of a Mad Libs thing. So first, I want you to give me some verbs. So put some verbs in. I'm going to grab a Post-it note here out of my desk drawer, and I want a couple of verbs. Back on. Yes, Anna caught it. Okay, yep, my English teacher fell. Okay, I'm waiting for a verb. Okay, run. I'm going to get another one. Here we go. Sprint. Oh, okay. There we go. Yell, shout. Okay. That's interesting how there's like pairs, right? Sprint, run, sprint, yell, shout, eat, speak. Okay. Grammar goodness. That's right. Okay. Now give me a couple adjectives. Got my verbs. Give me a couple adjectives. Ooh, I'm getting lots of good verbs. Escape. Lament. Wow. Love it. Okay. Yeah. Oh, whoa. These verbs. You guys are full of verby goodness. Okay. Wait, street is a noun. Yes, street is a noun. Okay. I'm waiting for some adjectives. I know there's a little bit. Okay. Fuzzy, terrible. Oh, Strubly. Oh, I love it. Strubly. Dead pink. Wow, you guys are awesome. Broken. Ignoramus is a noun. Let's see. Hungry. All right. I just grabbed a few. You guys are awesome. Okay, and then lastly, let's get some nouns. So I got my verbs, I got my adjectives, and now I need a couple nouns. I got ignoramus already. Ignoramus. Ooh, ethereal. Strudel kitty, you know that's one of my favorite words. Ethereal. Gooey. Xenophobic. Oh, this is awesome. Gooey. Those are still adjectives. I know what adjectives are. I don't get that much of an English teacher fail. Iridescent. Ooh, iridescent. Unstable. Nice. Okay, let's see. Jason, it doesn't get more iridescent by being typed in 4 times. Okay, let's see. Person, cat, lentils. Who typed in lentil cookie? Lentils. Lots of people. Dragon. There we go. McNugget. All right. I'll stop there. Let's see. Toilet paper. Oh, I can't do it. I promised somebody I wouldn't. Falcon. Moose. Okay. All right. So now, we're going to I'm going to take these that you suggested. I'm going to put them into this very same structure, right? Instead of out of the sea, or instead of out of the sky, I decided out of the sea, from a pin of a thing would run my gooey ignoramus. Out of the sea, from a pin of a thing would sprint my fuzzy person. Out of the sea, from a pin of a thing would yell my ethereal lentils. Out of the sea, from a pin of a thing, would shout my terrible dragon. That one's actually not bad. Out of the sea, from a pin of a thing, would eat my stroopy McNugget. Let's see. Out of the sea, from a pin of a thing, would escape my dead falcon. Oh, that's kind of sad. Out of the sea, from a pin of a thing, would lament my broken moose. Out of the sea, from a pin of a thing, would... Oh, I'm out of verbs. I couldn't keep up with you guys, but I want to use iridescent. And I have moose, and I have to use iridescent moose together because that must happen. In fact, I think iridescent moose needs to be its own hashtag. So I'll just go back to the beginning. Out of the sea from a pin of a thing would run my iridescent moose. Had to have it. Eat my Stroopy McNugget. Those were awesome. You guys, I want to tell you something. When you encounter beautiful structure like this, when you encounter something, take a moment to just devour it. Write that down. Play this little game with yourself. Like, do a lot of nouns, verbs, adjectives, whatever the part of speech is that's in that sentence, and just play with it. Make it your own, because when you learn this, like, this structure is beautiful. If you use this structure in a story that you're writing or in an essay that you write, the reader cannot help but be swayed by you, because there's power in this. And yes, we're making it funny by doing like iridescent moose and Stroopy, so awesome. But we're making it fun, and I think grammar can be fun. That's why I call it grammar goodness, right? Grammar is not boring. Grammar is exciting and fun, and have fun with it. Okay, so nice job, peeps. Those were awesome. I definitely think that next week we'll be looking at some of those and making some more cool Mad Libs with it. Okay, so we'll jump back into the chapter when Sam says, I would look at her, frightful, and wonder what made a bird and a boy. And I'll be honest with you guys, I was like, huh? I couldn't figure out, like, what is he wondering? Like, did you guys understand what he was saying here? Because I couldn't figure out, is he just saying, like, how does one group of cells turn? I mean, does he not understand DNA? Maybe not. Like, what? I didn't get what he was going for here. So if you guys had any ideas, I am open to learning from you. And then he says, I read some old notes about how to pile wood so I could get to it under the snow, and I laughed until Frightful awoke. And so this is when he like reads his own notes about how he had piled up the wood so that he'd be able to like tunnel to it. And then now he's laughing, realizing that never happened. That ended up not being a thing. And what I love, like loving you guys with this Stroopy McNugget, Stroobly potatoes. It made me think about, just because things don't work out, does that mean they're not useful? Or does that mean that they were useless? Like, just because you try something, it doesn't work out, does that mean you shouldn't have done it? Like, let's say you're like dating somebody and you break up. Like, does that mean you should never have dated that person? Or you try a recipe and it tastes terrible. Does that mean you should never have tried the recipe? If you try to take a class and you usually get A's, but you get B's in it, does that mean you shouldn't have taken the class? And not that that's a failure, but it's a different expectation than you normally have. Like, just because something doesn't work out the way you thought it would, does that mean you shouldn't have done it? And I think that that's amazing. I just love this. I'll trade you my iridescent. You guys are cracking me up so bad. Or good, I guess. Cracking me up so well. All right, so how does he learn? He learns from the deer. He actually is learning skills from the deer. And I thought that was so interesting. So he learned from some of the other animals about the winter. He's learning from the deer about like so many things, like nosing under the snow to get at plants. Like, he's just learning from so much around him, and he takes advantage of his environment to learn. So let's add to the skills. After he chops off the woods, he cooks all the things. So before, we've had some specific things that he made. Like when he starts out, it's like acorn pancakes. And then he adds like that sassafras tea, and he makes the jam. But now he's like cooking all the things. And especially at Christmas, we see that. It's amazing. Okay, next chapter, in which I learn about birds and people. Oh, this is more grammar goodness. Oh, the deer walked with us, the foxes flew in our footsteps, the winter birds flew over our heads, but mostly we were alone in the white wilderness. This is the kind of sentence that can be so easy to overlook, but if you set it up structurally, it's really cool, and it's neat repetition. So I divided it up into, here's the noun phrase, the deer, the foxes, the winter birds, and then the verb phrase, walked, followed, flew, and then this predicate phrase, and in all of these, it's a prepositional phrase. In all of these, the deer walked, how did they walk? With us. The foxes walked, how they follow? In our footsteps. So these are prepositional phrases that are serving as adverb phrases. So it's describing how the thing did the thing. So it's an adverb phrase, it was a prepositional phrase in there. So cool. The foxes followed in our footsteps. The winter birds flew over our heads. And if you see that structure, that parallel structure, it's not necessarily visible when you look at it like this. So sometimes you have to take the words out of the format you're seeing them, right? Like you're looking at them on the page in this linear way. And sometimes just in your mind's eye, do this. Because when I read it, my mind transferred it to this structure and I could see that parallel way to do it. And then notice then the repetition of that alliteration, the white wilderness that she ends the sentence with. I just love this. And one thing I would say is one of the things that parallel structure can get messed up is when you're writing and you think you're being parallel and you're really not. And so one of the ways you can check yourself is to set your own writing up like this, right? So like set it up and make sure, do I have noun phrases followed by a verb phrase followed by and in the same tense, and do I have the same kind of adverb phrase? So that can be really helpful to you. I just thought, just a moment of grammar goodness, so awesome. I did not become lonely, right? So this is during the winter. I didn't become lonely. I'd read so much about the loneliness of the farmer, the trapper, the woodsman during the bleakness of winter that I had come to believe it. Now, he'd been lonely before. So why is he not lonely now? What is the difference between when he was lonely before? Remember when Bando left and he was lonely? He was lonely before, but he's not lonely now. And I think when a character changes like this, when they have the same stressors, the same things happen, but they react to it differently, it's very important to pay attention to that, because you have to look at, has the character changed or have the circumstances changed? So is this different? And do you think when he starts naming the birds after his neighbors back in New York, do you think his neighbors would be flattered or offended by how he named his birds? I'm curious about what you guys think about that. Maybe I can get the comments off of Pokemon and back on to this. So do you think his neighbors would be flattered or offended by his naming the birds after them? And especially, you can really only answer this if you read that section and know why he named them what he named them. And then 2 days before Christmas, and I'm like, again, feeling the same way I did about Sunday. Like, how he must be doing something more than just the stick, because he wouldn't have kept track of Sunday and Christmas. Like, I feel like, I don't know. Okay, I'm seeing some of your answers coming in to flattered or offended, and that's kind of interesting. Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong. Is this the only outside thing? Because the Bando brings sugar and they make the jam out of it. And so, is this the only outside thing? I'm trying to think of other outside things besides the 6 things he brought with him in the beginning. Okay, so I'm interested in this, in your answers that are coming into flattered or offended. Oh, and I'm seeing some of this parallel structure. That's so cool. And Jason, you're very welcome. I love the community that you guys have built here. I just think it's awesome. Flattered because at least he's thinking of them. That's an interesting feedback. Yeah, I think that's an interesting perspective. At least he's thinking of you. Is it better to be thought of at all and thought of badly than not at all? I don't know. Interesting. Some thoughts. Let's see. He gets the stuff that floats along the river. Yeah, okay. Oh, the axle. Yeah. The axle, that's a good one, Strudel Kitty. Okay, so just, that was the only one I could think of. So, yeah, the stuff he finds in the woods, but I meant like outside stuff, like non-natural stuff. And then the newspapers. So the newspapers, so, okay, if you have this book, it's on page 120. If you have a different version, it'll be somewhere else. But it's the chapter I learned about birds and people. And this is when Bando tells him about all the ways that he's being covered in print. Wild boy suspected living off deer and nuts in wilderness of Catskills. And it says several hunters stated that this boy stole deer from them during the hunting season. And I think, and he says, I only took the ones they had wounded and couldn't find. And I'm like, ooh, Sam, you're kind of not being honest with us, because you told us that you took some of them that they didn't see before they could get there. So you need to be honest with yourself, Sam. We need to have an honesty intervention. And then some people believe he's crazy. And then it says, old woman reports meeting wild boy while picking strawberries. And they end it by saying that she is a fine old member of the community who only occasionally sees imaginary things. And then a young boy of 17 or 18. Well, he's 14, so they think he's much older. And I guess they probably think he's older because they don't expect that someone his age would actually be able to do this. He had left home with a group of Boy Scouts. Thanks for playing. Not true. And it says there was no evidence. They think that he left. Warden Jim Handy. So the fire warden says he had apparently left the area as there was no evidence of his camp upon a second trip. And I'm like, ooh, like you did a good job hiding your camp, Sam. But I feel like these newspapers are like two truths and a lie, playing two truths and a lie. And I think that is often true of the media. It's in general, right? This has always been the case that they only are as good as they are, and sometimes they don't get it quite right. So it's important to be open to the idea that you are the one responsible for making sure that you find out what's really going on and don't jump to conclusions. All right, so there are those newspapers playing two truths and a lie. All right, and then next we have his dad. When he runs away, his dad says this. So the dad comes for Christmas and he says, I was sure you'd be back the next day. And I wonder how often, like, some people think, like, well, I didn't really do anything about it in the moment because I thought it was just going to resolve itself, right? Like, I thought it was going to be fine. I thought you'd be back the next day. And I just thought that was, this is why the dad is explaining why he didn't come after him. And I don't know that I buy that, because I think it had more to do with the fact that the dad says there are 8 kids in the family. And I wonder, do you think his parents would have had this same reaction if he'd been an only child? Like, if Sam had been an only child and had run away like this, do you think the dad would have had the same reaction? Do you think the mom would have been like, oh, okay, he's off living in the woods, we'll just let him be there? Okay. So just curious what you guys think about that. Do you think they would care more? Do you think parents are more, that they pay more careful attention to what kids do when there are fewer children? Not in a bad way, that if there are lots of kids, but just in a way of like, is there less freedom for you? Because you can't hide it, right? And you can't even hide, you know what? Ooh, I'm running out of time. Oh, okay. I want to tell you this story, but okay. Okay, and his dad, he was very cool toward Frightful until he learned that she was the best provider we'd ever had in the family. And I thought that was so true, because sometimes a single quality will redeem someone in our eyes. And then he says, that was the last I saw of Dad for a long time. And this just made me so sad, because it made me think about how so many of you said goodbye to friends like before you went on spring break or something, not knowing that you were not going to see them again for months. And like, it's so hard. Like, when you say goodbye to somebody, you don't know at the time that you're like never going to see them again. But then sometimes you say goodbye to somebody and you know you're not going to see them again for a long, long time. And it's really sad. And I just don't know which is harder. Okay, next, in which I have a good look at winter and find spring in the snow. It says, I lived close to the weather. It's surprising how you watch it when you live in it. And I put this picture of a farm in the background here, because when I lived in Iowa and there's heavy farming communities, people pay very close attention to the weather. You pay very close attention to how much rain falls, whether it's too much, too little, just right, how much sun there is. You want that corn knee high by the 4th of July. There are like certain things that you're looking for. And I wonder if any of you live somewhere where your families are engaged in a profession that is very dependent upon the weather, and that maybe you watch the weather more. And then he says, we all had our little patch in the wilderness, and we all fought to return there in the storm. And I just really want a hobbit house. And so that's why I picked this little patch in the wilderness. But I think when storm comes, we all have a place that we retreat to, right? And I'm curious what yours is. Like, is yours your bedroom? Is it a friend's house? Where is your little patch in the wilderness? Maybe a library? Where's your patch in the wilderness? It says it really is very special to have a horned owl. He needs lots of forest and big trees, and so his presence means that the Gribbly farm is a beautiful place indeed. And that made me think of how if you have worms in the soil, it's a sign of good soil. And I wondered if you could think of any, I was trying to think of other things where, like, if you have it, it's a sign that something else good is going on. I was curious if you guys could think of any of those. And then he says, a maple at the edge of the meadow had literally blown up. Okay, friends, this sent me on like a half-hour long dive down the interwebs looking to see if this is possible and true. So, I looked it up, and it is true that this can happen. So what happens is cold weather will cause some trees to explode because the sap freezes. So when the sap freezes, and the sap contains water. So when the water in the sap expands, when it freezes, right? So water expands when it freezes, as you know, hashtag fourth grade science. Then as that water expands, as it freezes, it creates a sound like a gunshot as the bark of the tree splits and the wood contracts as that sap expands out. And it turns out that to some Indian tribes, the Sioux of the Dakotas and the Cree, that the first new moon after the new year in some dialects was called the moon of the exploding trees. And I found some videos on YouTube that purported to have that sound, but I wasn't sure that it hadn't been faked, and so I didn't include it, but that is actually a thing apparently. So then we have the sun had come through and the forest sparkled and shone, or shone, or shone, either way is appropriate in English, in cruel splendor. And I just thought that was such beautiful wording, and it made me think of wording from a poet named William Butler Yeats. And he said, this is a poem he wrote about the Irish Revolution. And he said, all changed utterly. A terrible beauty is born. And it just, when I read this line, that the sun shone in cruel splendor, the cruel splendor made me think of terrible beauty. And I think one of the other things that makes me think of terrible beauty is Snow White, because I think the wicked stepmother, Maleficent, is like a terrible beauty. And anyway, I think this is, the reason I included it is because it's one of those times where when you know about reading and you've read, that then you get more out of your reading. Like that only occurred to me because I'd read Yeats. And so I think that as you guys become deeper and deeper in your reading, that one of the things to keep in mind is, are you reading something that's going to give you that sense of joy and resonance in other novels that you read? And he says, hunger is a funny thing. It has a kind of intelligence all its own. And this was when he wanted to eat the livers, and it was because he almost kills himself from scurvy. And I looked this up as well, and there's absolutely no science to back it up. There's no science to back up the idea that you might actually crave something because you're deficient in it. Apparently that's not really true. Too bad. And then it says, my heart beat faster. I think I was trembling. The value also blurred. The only thing that can do that is tears. So I guess I was crying. And this is Sam's reaction to realizing it was spring. Like he had so much, oh, she's not Maleficent. She's the evil queen. I've got my Disney mixed up. Thank you guys for correcting me. You're right. It's the evil queen. Sorry. I'm not up on my Disney, to be honest. I should be careful. So this is Sam's reaction, and I'm wondering, like, sometimes do we cry from other emotions besides just sadness? Because he's definitely not sad that it's spring. So I'm curious what you think. What other emotions can cause tears besides just sadness? What other emotions can cause tears? He says, spring is terribly exciting when you're living right in it. And it made me wonder, like, what kinds of things do we miss because we're not really in it? Like, we're not paying attention. And I just think that was an interesting thought. And he says of frightful, she was a captive, not a wild bird, and that's almost another kind of bird. Do you think that's true? Never mess up Disney. I think Disney's confusing. There's so many mean people and so many princesses. I don't know how you keep them straight. So is this true? Is it true of, here we go, that you can have totally different things? Like, is it true that, like, is a wild dog a completely different kind of dog than a domesticated dog? What about wild horses? Like, is this true of other things besides birds? I don't know. What do you guys think? And then he says, the wild boy of the Catskills does exist. This is when the boy reporter, Matt, shows up, and Sam tells him this fake story about the wild boy, but Matt figures it out, and they make this deal, right? And that was such a cool thing. I thought this part was a little bit strange, just a little bit weird, where he says he can get 4 people talking in his head all at once, and then even Frightful speaks in his head, saying, you want to be found, or you would not have told Matt all you did. She's like, right. She's right. Frightful is wise. Frightful is wisdom. Okay, how Sam learns his skills. He learned some of his skills from his mother. He learned about a balanced diet from his mother. All right, so now we're skipping to Sam's skills. He cooks all the things. He makes snowshoes, and he makes syrup. I mean, this guy, just nothing. More about the spring and the winter and the beginning of my story's end. I had sought out a human being. This is that guy who was humming in the woods. That would not have happened a year ago. And when Sam encounters this guy, Aaron, humming, he doesn't even try to avoid him. And it is rare that an author will do this. It's rare that an author will say a character has changed. Usually they let you kind of make that decision for yourself in noticing the change. But here, George comes right out and says, I was different. She has the character say, I was different. And then in which I cooperate with the ending. Whale of a word, dynamic character. Sam is a changing character. He changes from the beginning of the novel to the end. We saw it there in the I wouldn't have sought out somebody. There are other changes. What are some other dynamic characters in the story besides Sam? Does anybody else in the story change, right? So a static character is a character who's essentially the same from the beginning of the story to the end. So like if you've ever read The Great Gatsby, Daisy Buchanan, same in the beginning and the end. If you've read Charlotte's Web, Charlotte is the same in the beginning and the end. Fern is the same in the beginning and the end. Wilbur changes. Templeton the Rat is the same, right? So there's our static characters stay the same. Dynamic characters change. Almost always the protagonist is going to be dynamic. Otherwise, it's a pretty boring story. And really stories all boil down to how did the character change. But I'm curious about if there are any other dynamic characters in this story besides Sam. Can any of you think of any? His dad. Ooh, okay. That's a good one, Jeanette. Frightful. Ooh, nice. And Bando. Okay, yeah. Oh, I don't think it's stupid, Deb Coatney. I could totally convert you to The Great Gatsby. Okay. And then he says people live too close together, and like that's the source of all ills. And I wonder if you think that's true. Like, what are the pros and cons of living near each other in very close proximity? And Sam says, there are people in the city who are lonelier than I. And I wonder, do you think loneliness even has anything to do with being alone? I don't know. Like, you can be lonely in a crowd for sure. So I thought that was interesting. And he said that word together, maybe that was the answer to the city. And science backs this up. There's science that backs up that we actually need social connection. People who have lots of social relationships, they get dementia later. It protects your physical health. It's really important to have social connection. So he was right. And then this question, he says, time was running out. And I wonder, can you really run away? Like, he recognizes time is running out. And he says, I went to the library. Ooh, English teacher fail. I went to the library the next day, not he next day, and took out 4 books. And I'm like, does he want to be found? I mean, he doesn't even say what he wants the books for. I think he wants to be found. Okay, whale of illusion. Remember, an illusion is a reference to something, usually in literature. And we did, in the last class, we did like Desdemona and Thoreau. Here we get this illusion. He says to Bando, I think I have a new home. I think I have a new address, right? And he asks Bando, is it Broadway and 42nd Street? And Bando says, yes. And that's a reference to Broadway and 42nd Street is a reference to the theater district in New York City. And that's like the heart of the theater district. So what he's saying is, my whole life is a show. My life is on display. It's important when you see an illusion to recognize what he means. And then last chapter of the book. I know, more fails than ever. It's true. He says, my heart was heavy. When they left, I rolled over on my stomach and wondered if I could get in touch with the Department of the Interior and find out more about the public lands in the West. My next thought was the baseball game Oh, another English teacher fail. Oh my goodness, we are having a record. Not gave, but game. Wow, I was going too quickly. I should have done a little check here. I promise next week, fewer fails. So I think that this is so interesting. The reporters show up and Sam has this internal conflict. Like, does he want to be found? Does he not want to be found? And okay, so people talking, just another fangirl on the interwebs talking about Broadway. Have you been watching those shows on the weekend when they've been doing the Andrew Lloyd Webber? It's been amazing. All right. I could hear the voices of other people and they filled my silent mountain. And we see this incrementalism in the training of the Falcon. And even though it's much faster than it would really occur in how he trains Frightful, he shows that process. I forgot to show you my other little puppet. The other little puppet that I think is a new character that really comes out this week is the mouse. The little field mouse with the white. I didn't have a brown mouse with white. I only have this mouse puppet. But the little mouse comes out and I thought it was just so cute. And anyway, so I know, you're so cute. Yes, so cute. So I think that he shows the process, right? Like, this incrementalism in the training of the Falcon. And so, sorry, I interrupted my own thought, but I think this contrasts with the way he's almost always able to just do these things. And it's a little unbelievable. I think Deb Coatney pointed out in Hatchet, it was much harder for the character. I think it was Deb Coatney who pointed that out, that it's much harder to learn. And I think he learns. And I think this is what's going on here, is just this like difference in how like they fill his silent mountain and he has filled it really. But Dad, a Gribbly, he says, but Dad, a Gribbly is not for the land, like throwing his dad's words back into him. And so then his mom says, well, if he won't come home, we will bring home to him. And then Sam says, at house, you'll spoil everything. And that ended it. And I just felt like the ending, it was like, that's the ending. It's just so abrupt. Like, okay, we're going to come make our house here. We're going to do our own trees and we're going to build a house. And then we're going to build a house right by your tree. I don't know if that's better or worse. Like, I just don't know, because the tree is just like, it's so special. And so I don't know. Anyway, I thought the ending was so abrupt. Did any of you think the ending was abrupt? I just didn't even have time to process it. It was just too abrupt for me. I needed a little bit more warning that it was coming, right? I needed to know. So we come to the end and we say, can you ever really run away? And in Sam's case, I think the answer is for sure no, that he can't, because they came to him even if he had not gone to them, which he did. And then what does it mean to be self-reliant? And all the skills that Sam had, what skills do you need that you don't have? And what skills do you have? I would love to see you all write a list of all your skills. Yeah, you're right. There are sequels. That's a good point, Will. I don't know if she knew when she wrote it that there would be, but you're right. There is that. Okay, so here's my question. What is the one skill that if you developed it would make the most positive difference in your life? So I'll be interested to see those come in. All right. Learning from the rock stars. You guys were amazing. Like literal rock stars creating the playlist. It was so cool. Like, you guys did a great job. This is what it looked like when you did it. And then I went and made the playlist on YouTube, and it's in order of the chapters. And so I went through all the chapters, and then I started again with the alternates. And so in the playlist description, you can see all of the chapters. You see how they are there on the left. I have the name of the chapter and then the song that was chosen. And so it goes on for a long time, and the playlist is amazing. Playlist is amazing. And you can find it here. You can find it here. I think I can actually paste that. There it is in the chat. If you want to go and listen to it, it is so good. Okay. And then next week, His Majesty's Dragon will be starting again. You don't have to have read anything for it, but you go get the flyer here. Okay, and so we come to the end. And I'm curious, what's your biggest takeaway from this novel? Like, when you think of this novel 10 years from now and you remember reading it, what will you remember? Not just about the experience of like being in Mrs. Van's class and being a Vanstar, but the novel itself. Like, what will you feel What will your emotion be like? Imagine that you're at a Christmas party for your work, a work Christmas party, and somebody brings up My Side of the Mountain. Like, oh, I just want to run away like that kid in My Side of the Mountain. What feeling will you have? I want to know. So if your songs didn't get included, it was because I had created it before, because I did all the songs that were in there. So I may have created it before you got there. I can go back and look and make edits later. Oh, Deb Coatney, I disagree. You will remember it in 10 years. I bet if I ran into you in the store and said, remember My Side of the Mountain? You'd be like, yes, frightful. You would use some hashtags. Maybe I should try it. Oh, so nice. And we say goodbye. We say goodbye to Frightful. It's kind of sad. I think it's sad. And we say goodbye to the Baron Weasel. And we say goodbye to Jesse C. James. And we say goodbye to the little nuthatches. What was the nuthatch's name? It's like Mr. Brackett, the chickadee. It was a chickadee. We say goodbye to Mr. Brackett and the little mouse. The little mouse. We have to say goodbye to our little field mouse. And we say goodbye to the tree. We say goodbye to the tree. And I just love this quote. This is Annie Dillard, who is a beautiful writer, and she said she read books as one would breathe air to fill up and live. And I know some of that. So I see Jay Sand. I would smile with happiness, remembering Mrs. Van and all my lifelong friends I got from this class, and remember that you can't run away. So nice. I think so many of us read like this to fill up and live. And Anne Frank said in her diary, if I read a book that impresses me, I have to take myself firmly by the hand before I mix with other people. Otherwise, they would think my mind rather queer. And queer in the sense of different, right? Like odd. And I think that happens to me. I'm like, I have to come out of the forest and mix with everybody. And William Feather said, finishing a book is like leaving an old friend. And I think it's important to honor that when you end a book, to honor that time you spent. So thank you all so much for joining me today. And I hope to see you next week. And this is Mrs. Vanstar signing